Hope you're having a great day. I am Riya Sharma, a law student from Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies, and I welcome you all to this session on behalf of Nitesh Mehra and Associates. So today's discussion will be focused on the role of Article 32 of the Indian Constitution in guaranteeing remedies by way of writ and public interest litigation as a paradigm for developing nations. As we move forward, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Ms. Meenakshi Kalra, Advocate on Record, Supreme Court. Ms. Meenakshi Kalra is an advocate on record in Supreme Court of India and a PhD research scholar in arbitration. She is practicing at the Supreme Court of India and the High Court of Delhi, and she is a member at the SN Kalra & Co. and has been previously impaneled with the DLSA. She is dealing with civil and matrimonial matters. So Article 32 is one of the most important provisions provided by our constitution, as it provides the right to individuals to move to the Supreme Court to seek justice when they feel that they have been deprived of their rights. So with this, we all look forward to having an informative and enlightening session from you, Ms. Meenakshi, on the role of Article 32 in guaranteeing remedies by way of writ and public interest litigation. Over to you, ma'am. You may begin.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Thank you, Ria, for such warm introduction and giving an overview of today's topic. I especially thank Nitesh for giving me this opportunity, and I welcome all the participants here. So I'll start my presentation. Is the PPT visible to everybody?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
So coming to today's topic, which is the role of Article 32 of the Constitution in guaranteeing remedies by way of writs and public litigation as a paradigm for developing nation. We all know that Article 32 is the heart and soul of the Constitution because this is the way through which our fundamental rights can be enforced before the court of law. And therefore, Article 32 plays a pivotal role in the Constitution of India. So coming to today's topic, Article 32 is basically Article 32 and 226, which is Article 32 is provided with the Supreme Court of India and the Article 226 is provided with the High Court of India, all the various High Court jurisdictions. So Article 32 and 226 of the Constitution provide two separate but parallel provisions of writ jurisdiction with the Supreme Court and High Courts respectively. Article 32 has been incorporated as a fundamental right and it provides for the constitutional remedy against violation of any fundamental rights. In my previous webinar with Mr. Ritesh, I had already discussed in length about the fundamental rights and the fundamental duties. So therefore, I chose this topic today. So give an overview of how to enforce those fundamental rights. And therefore, there Article 32 comes into picture. So the remedy limited in the Article 32 is very limited, whereas in Article 226, the power is in a wider scope and a vast jurisdiction. In the Article 32, there are specific provisions wherein the fundamental rights cannot be suspended. However, under provision of Article 32, Clause 4, there are provisions wherein the fundamental rights can be suspended and the enforcement of such fundamental rights can be stopped in case of an emergency or in case of a financial emergency. We all know in the sphere of Indira Gandhi, when she was a prime minister, she had during her tenure proclaimed emergency, and during that time the fundamental rights were suspended and nobody, no citizen of India or anybody could challenge the non-violation of the fundamental rights or non-enforcement of the fundamental rights. Therefore, the right to move to Supreme Court is almost an absolute right and guaranteed under the Constitution itself, except in the case of suspension of these rights, which is provided in the Constitution under the emergency provisions. Though the grant of relief or not to grant the relief is absolutely discretion of the Supreme Court, but the apex court can be moved for violation of the fundamental rights as a matter of right. But this is limited to the extent that it is a different matter in the High Court, wherein the discretion is a wider scope and the enforcement of the rights by way of writs are much wider. Because as we all know, a lot of us are practicing advocates and we know that the purview of High Court under this jurisdiction is much higher than the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, because in High Court, a lot of times for enforcement of the rights or enforcement of the orders, we approach the High Courts under the writ petitions where the remedy of appeal is not provided, or the remedy of appeal has been already exhausted. So the provision of Article 226 is a constitutional provision, but it's not a fundamental rights. There is no guarantee attached, unlike to the Article 32. The scope of Article 226 is wider than the Article 32 because the operation of Article 226 is not limited to the violation of fundamental rights only. It can be operated for other purposes also. However, in entertaining the writs, the High Court enjoys a wide and open powers of matter of discretion. It is a plenary power of the High Court without any factor from any provisions of the Constitution, since it's an extraordinary jurisdiction with the High Court and it is not to be resorted to in routine. We all know the writ jurisdiction is a discretionary jurisdiction, and a lot of times that the Supreme Court and High Court do not entertain the jurisdiction and observe the discretion in not entertaining those petitions where they found that the petitions are frivolous and for a ulterior motive. And a lot of times there are several imposition of heavy costs on such PILs and the writs which are being recently also the Supreme Court in one of the cases wherein the lockdown was requested to be lifted up was challenged before the Kerala High Court, and the Kerala High Court had imposed a cost of these 1 lakh on such writ by way of a PIL which was filed. So the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court can be invoked under the Article 32 of the Constitution for violation of the fundamental rights guaranteed under the Part 3 of the Constitution. And any provision in the Constitution for fundamental rights is meaningless unless there is an adequate safeguard to ensure that enforcement of such provisions. See, the Article 32 and the writs and the fundamental rights are correlated, because if there is no enforcement of such fundamental rights, there is no purpose of such fundamental rights. There has to be a scope for an opportunity to enforce those rights in the scenario where those such rights are not being able to be enforced. So coming to the writs which are here, basically Article 32, we all know, it was incorporated within the inception of the Constitution, and Dr. Ambedkar has clearly held that Article 32 is the heart and soul of the Constitution. So coming to the writs, basically if we speak about writs, what are writs? Writs are basically fundamentally, a writ is a formal written order by anybody, executive or judicial, who is authorized to do so. In modern times, the body is generally the courts, as we all know. So therefore, a writ, it can be understood as a formal written order issued by a court having authority to issue such order. And orders, warrants, directions, and summon, etc. are essentially writs. Writs basically can be by way of a direction, by way of an order, by way of a warrant. And a lot of times we have seen that suo motu, the Supreme Court and the High Court have taken up matters which are concerning the nation. And by way of several suo motu petitions, the matters have been heard and decided and taken cognizance of. Recently also, the Honorable Supreme Court, by way of a writ petition on the suo motu petition, they extended the limitation period considering the difficulties faced by the lawyers in filing the petitions. And therefore, it was only under the provisions of Article 32 that this order was granted, that the limitation is suspended until the functioning of the courts resort to normalcy. So basically, coming to the writs are basically 5 in ratio. The 5 writs are basically the writ of habeas corpus, quo warranto, certiorari, prohibitio, and habeas corpus. So all these 5 writs I'll discuss in detail. So coming to the first writ which is there, which is the writ of habeas corpus. So habeas corpus is basically a Latin term which says to have the body, or to say to produce the body. So habeas corpus is an order issued by the court to a person who has detained another person, or to produce the body before it. So we have seen a lot of times it happens that some people are illegally detained by the police authorities, and therefore under the such writs, in violation of the fundamental rights, if a person is illegally detained, By virtue of the writ of habeas corpus, he can approach the Honorable High Court and Supreme Court for enforcement of such right and to question such illegal detention. We all know recently when there were a lot of massacre happening and a lot of riots happening in Delhi, a lot of petitions were filed before the Honorable Supreme Court under the Article 32, challenging such illegal detentions. And in a certain matters, the Supreme Court had also taken cognizance and the bails were granted to certain persons in such cases. So, in what manner is the habeas corpus petition can be entertained, a writ can be entertained? Basically, habeas corpus is the most valuable writ of personal liberty because in this writ, a person can challenge if his personal liberty has been violated, which is the utmost fundamental rights which all of us citizens have. So, a person who's arrested, he can move to the court, or any person on behalf of such person who has been illegally detained can approach the court by way of such habeas corpus, and the court will question the detaining authority and ask them about what is the authority by virtue of them they have detained such person. And if the detaining authority does not have legal valid grounds to detain a person, the courts automatically take custody and take cognizance of such offences and penalize such persons who are illegally detained. So the principle of habeas corpus ensures that a prisoner can be released from unlawful detention, that is a detention lacking sufficient cause or evidence. However, in habeas corpus, there were also several other petitions which were filed wherein the rights of a prisoner were being challenged. A landmark case of being the ADM Jabalpur versus Shivakant Shukla case, wherein this habeas corpus case was, the case was during the emergency it was filed. And it was observed that even in an emergency, a habeas corpus petition can still be entertained and be heard upon if the illegal detention is being there happening. So there are a lot of Supreme Court has widened the scope of habeas corpus even in the proclaimed emergency situation. So who can basically apply for a writ of habeas corpus? A habeas corpus writ can be made by any person who's illegally detained, and but in certain cases an application of habeas corpus can also be made by any person on behalf of the prisoner, being a friend or a relative or a lawyer for that matter. And if a custodian is acting beyond his authority, then the prisoner must be released. There are others landmark judgments which are there, which is the case of Sunil Batra versus Delhi administration and DS Nakara versus Union of India. So in the case of Sunil Batra versus Delhi administration, the Supreme Court had held that a habeas corpus petition can not only be issued for releasing a prisoner from illegal detention, but can also be enforced for protecting the prisoners from the inhuman and barbarous treatment during the detention. We all know that certain times there are cases which are coming up, and recently there was a case wherein a female child who was taken into custody by the police officials, and she was not she was tortured to a certain extent that she had become also pregnant and certainly had lost her life. And in this, the habeas corpus petition has been filed, and the police personnel who were involved in such barbarous act have already been suspended, and some of them have already been terminated as well. So another case of DS Nakara versus Union of India. In this case, it was held that a registered society, which is a non-political or a non-profit making and voluntarily organization, is also entitled to file a writ petition. Since the scope of habeas corpus is such that a person who is illegally detained or a person through a friend or relative can also approach under the habeas corpus petition, and DS Nakara judgment is one of such judgments which enhances the scope of jurisdiction under the habeas corpus. So coming to the next writ, which is the writ of mandamus. So under the writ of mandamus, this basically means we command. It is a Latin word again, which says that mandamus is basically an order from the superior court to the lower court or the tribunal or public authority to perform an act which falls within its duty. In this writ, it is basically issued to secure the performance of a public duty, and to enforce the private rights withheld by the public authorities. Simply, it is a writ issued to a public official to do a thing which is a part of his official duty. There are certain times that the petitions are filed and the courts, the lower courts, refuse to entertain and exercise their powers under such petitions. And during these times, the writ of mandamus can be enforced by a lawyer by approaching the Supreme Court and directing the lower court to exercise its jurisdiction, which it has. We all know that the Civil Code of Procedure simply gives the provision that we have to start from the lower court and exercise our rights from the lower courts as well. And therefore, if a lower court refuses to entertain exercise its discretion, under such purviews, the mandamus writ comes into picture. So basically, what is the primary purpose of the writ of mandamus? The writ of mandamus is basically a command directed to any person, corporation, or any inferior tribunal requiring them to do some particular thing which pertains to his or her office and which is the nature of a public duty. Mandamus is a writ which cannot be exercised on a private organization. It is always on a public organization, and therefore the public servants are responsible to the public for the lawfulness of their public duties and their actions under it. So if a public authority fails to do what is required under law or does beyond what was to be done, a writ of mandamus may be issued to him to make him do what is required under law. Mandamus may also be issued to a tribunal. We all know, so in today's world, a lot of tribunals have been formed for exercising several other acts. So there is a tribunal for the consumer protection. There's a tribunal under the RERA, and there are a national company law tribunal. So therefore, even the tribunals come under the purview of the mandamus. So when will a writ of mandamus lie? A writ of mandamus will only lie when there is a legal right of the applicant for the performance of a legal duty. The nature of duty which has to be exercised is in the form of a public and not a private duty or a private service for that matter. And on the date of the petition, the right which is sought to be enforced must be subsisting. So while a writ of mandamus is being exercised or being filed, it is very much necessary that that right to enforce or to get the relief should be subsisting on that point of time. And a writ of mandamus cannot be issued for an anticipated injury. So if we have an apprehension that probably a judge or a tribunal will not exercise this discretion, we cannot enforce it under the mandamus. It is only when the lower court or the tribunal refuses to entertain or exercise its jurisdiction, then only by virtue of the mandamus, a writ can be filed before the Article 32 to direct or given command to the lower court by the Honorable Supreme Court for exercising their duty. So when will basically a mandamus not lie? A mandamus will not lie when it is a mere discretion of the authority to exercise their rights. So if the provisions of an act give a discretion upon the authority or the tribunal or the court to exercise its jurisdiction in discretionary manner, so you cannot file a mandamus seeking a direction that the order should be passed in that favor, because it is a discretion which is provided, and it is the discretion of the court whether to give the relief or whether to not give a relief if it's a discretionary provision. Also, the mandamus will not lie, as already discussed before, that it will not lie against a private individual or a private organization. So let's suppose that if a company or a corporation, which is a private organization, refuses to give you a duty, or it refuses to give a relief to you, then in that scenario, you cannot by way of writ enforce it and direct the Supreme Court to give directions to a private individual. So it is only against a public authority, probably a court or a tribunal. So the landmark cases in the case of mandamus are S.P. Gupta versus Union of India, wherein a writ of mandamus was filed against the President of India. And this writ basically was filed against the President of India for fixing the number of judges of the High Courts and filling the vacancies. And the Honorable Supreme Court clearly held that the President is not a public authority by virtue under the provisions of mandamus, and therefore Supreme Court basically does not entertain any writs against the president for under the purview of mandamus. Another very landmark case is the case of Advocates on Record Association versus State of Gujarat. So in this case, the Supreme Court had ruled out that the judge's issue is a justiciable issue, and appropriate measures can be taken for that purpose, including the issuance of mandamus. So in the case of the appointments of the judges, if there is a writ of mandamus which is being filed, so that will be entertained. And this Advocate on Record Association with the State of Gujarat is the landmark case under the writ of mandamus. Now coming to the third writ which is there is a writ of prohibition. So writ of prohibition is basically the writ to forbid or to prohibit public authority from doing an act which is exceeding its jurisdiction or usurping its jurisdiction. So basically, if like in the case of the previous mandamus writ, wherein the writ is basically filed to direct a person, provide the directions, a prohibition writ is basically to prohibit a public authority or to forbid a public authority from exercising its jurisdiction which is not there. So it is basically issued to a lower or a subordinate court by a superior court in order to refrain it from doing something which is not supposed to do as per law. It is usually issued when the lower courts act in excess of their jurisdictions. Also, it can also be issued if the court acts outside its jurisdiction. And after it is issued, the lower court is bound to stop its proceedings and should be issued before the lower court passes an order. So basically, prohibition is a writ which has to be filed immediately whenever it is found that if a lower court is exercising a jurisdiction which is beyond as per law, and therefore it has to be issued before such law is passed or before such orders is passed, so that to prohibit such lower court or such tribunal or authority to not exceed its power. So prohibition is a writ which has to be filed in a speedy format. The landmark case in the writ of prohibition is S. Govind Menon versus Union of India. It was held in this case by the Supreme Court that prohibition is not a continuation of the proceedings to be prohibited. Its object is on the contrary to arrest an inferior tribunal's proceedings. It is a collateral matter, progress is essentially between two tribunals, an inferior one and the other superior one, by which the latter, by virtue of its superintendence over the former, restrains it within its rightful competence. Its nature is held to depend upon the nature of proceedings to be prohibited. The writ can be issued only when the proceedings are pending in a court. If the proceedings has matured into a decision, a writ will not lie. When the court before whom the matter is pending has ceased to exist in that conditions too, the writ of prohibition will not lie, because there is no proceedings upon which it can operate. But on the other hand, if the court is functioning, the writ can be issued at any stage of the proceeding before the inferior court or the tribunal, and against a judicial or a legislative function, because we all see that there's a famous saying that prevention is better than cure. So it is very much required that we prevent such jurisdiction exceeding its power, and by virtue of a prohibition writ, you prevent such court from exercising a jurisdiction which is beyond as per law permissible for them to act upon. Coming to the next writ, which is the writ of certiorari. So basically, we all know that, probably I assume that we all know that the writ of certiorari and a writ of prohibition are a collateral writs, because certiorari is filed, writ under certiorari is filed when such order has already been filed and when such order has been passed which is beyond the jurisdiction of such authority, while the prohibition writ is filed only when the proceedings are undergoing. So prohibition is filed when the proceedings are undergoing, and the certiorari writ is filed when such authority is already acted in exceeding of its jurisdiction. So what is basically a certiorari writ? certiorari writ is to be a certified or to be informed. So basically, a writ of certiorari is issued by the Supreme Court to some inferior court or tribunal to transfer its matter to it from some other superior authority for proper consideration. The writ of certiorari can be issued by the Supreme Court or any high court for quashing the order already passed by the inferior court. So if an order has already been passed by a lower court, which is not as per its jurisdiction, the Supreme Court can call upon such records of such proceedings and decide accordingly. So certiorari is available on a similar ground but at a later stage. It can also be said that the writ of prohibition is available during the tendency of the proceedings before a subordinate court, while certiorari can be resorted only after the order of the decision has been announced. So the landmark cases under the writ of certiorari are basically the case of Surya Dev Rai versus Ramchandra Rai and Hari Vishnu Kamath versus Ahmad Ishaq. So in the case of Hari Vishnu Kamath versus Ahmad Ishaq, there was an order passed by a lower court which was directly challenged before the Honorable Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court had entertained such petition under the writ of certiorari, not considering that the appeal was not filed. And under such the matters were called upon, and the lower court was again directed to decide the case afresh on merits. So basically, a writ of certiorari can be issued to a judicial and to a quasi-judicial body also. So when can the writ of certiorari can be filed? A writ of certiorari can only be filed when there is a want or excess of jurisdiction, and secondly, for correcting the error of law apparent on the face of record. The writ is also issued for correcting an error of law apparent on the face of record, and it cannot be issued on a correct fact, a correct correction of a fact. So if there is only when the law has been exceeded, not in a misrepresentation of a fact, when the lower court has not decided the matter on the facts properly, a writ of certiorari cannot be enforced. A writ of certiorari can only be enforced when there is a mistake of law and not a mistake of fact. When there is an exercise of jurisdiction above its jurisdiction under law, a writ of certiorari can be enforced, and not when a matter has not been decided as per the facts of the case. So coming to the last writ, which is the writ of quo warranto. So quo warranto is basically the writ which in the Latin words is explained as what is the authority or by what warrant. So under the quo warranto, a writ can be filed questioning the authority of a public authority, of a public organization. So it is basically issued by a court to inquire into the legality of a claim of a person to a public office. So it can be issued only in a case of substandard public office or a permanent character, and it cannot be issued in cases of ministerial or private office. So when can a writ under the quo warranto be issued? The writ of quo warranto can only be issued when the office of question is a public office. If it is held that the person without the legal authority, the writ of quo warranto is not issued in respect of a private character. It can only be issued under the private public offences and not under the private organizations. So the famous case under the quo warranto writ is basically the case of Jamalpur Arya Samaj versus T. Ram. So in this case, the meaning of quo warranto, which is what is the authority, was decided, and it was held by the Honorable Supreme Court that the writ of quo warranto be issued against a person who's holding a public office or a governmental privilege. So any person who's acting contrary to the government authority or the public authority can be questioned about his exercise of his jurisdiction. So basically, a quo warranto writ requires that the concerned person who has been questioned has to explain the court by what authority he holds the office. So if a person is holding office which is presumed to be illegal and not as per law, the such authority, such holding of office can be questioned under the quo warranto. Although the quo warranto writs are very few. There are very few writs which have been filed under the quo warranto. The major writs which are being filed are under the habeas corpus or under the writ of certiorari and prohibitio. But quo warranto is not the writ which is mostly exercised and which is not such popular among the other writs which are available. So now we need to also discuss, so what are the limitations to Article 32. As already I told in the beginning, that Article 32 is a right which cannot be taken away because it is the heart and soul of the Constitution. However, there are certain provisions which is like the Article 32 clause 4 provides that there are certain restrictions to the enforcement of the fundamental rights under the Article 32. So let's discuss about that now. The limitations to Article 32 have been provided under Article 33, wherein a parliament has been empowered to make changes in the application of the fundamental rights to the armed forces and to the police, who are empowered to the duty for their proper discharge of the duty. So, in the scenario that when the armed forces have to exercise their duty or have to undergo a proper war or something like that, or the police, if there is a limitation in the doing the duty of a police official, under such powers, the Article 32 can be suspended if the authority is a police authority or an armed forces who are performing their duty respectively. But such duty has to be within the scope of their jurisdiction and not beyond the jurisdiction that they can exercise their rights. So basically, also under Article 352, the Article 32 can be suspended when there is an emergency proclaimed. And the fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 19 is restricted by the Parliament under Article 358 during the pendency of an emergency. We all know when our country is under the emergency situation, it is very much important that we as a dutiful citizen should forego the enforcement of our fundamental rights, because it is the nation which has to be taken into consideration and has to be on the limelight and the importance of every citizen. Therefore, rightfully, under Article 354 of the Constitution, the fundamental rights are suspended during the situation of an emergency, and the enforcement of such rights, fundamental rights as provided under Part 3 of the Constitution, are suspended during the times of emergency. So there's another article, which is the Article 359, which confers the power on the president to suspend Article 32 of the Constitution. So president, as we all know, is the power to proclaim the emergency, and therefore he also has a right to suspend the emergency, suspend the fundamental rights during the times of some emergency. And however, the order of such president for proclaiming an emergency can be submitted to the Parliament, and the Parliament may disapprove of such president order. However, there is also a limitation to this, that there are certain timelines which are there, and which is a requirement that under the Parliament also there is a majority that has to be formed for disapproving the president's order for such emergency which has been declared. Because while in the case of Indira Gandhi, when she had proclaimed financial emergency during her tenure, it was eventually only by the Parliament that it was suspended and left alone. So therefore, although Article 32 is a very important aspect of the Constitution, however, there are certain limitations which are there, including the Article 32. So now coming to the another topic, which is collateral to the Article 32, which is recently in a much amaze, because public interest litigation, PIL, which are being filed on a regular basis and in a large numbers before the Supreme Court on various issues. And the Supreme Court has also in certain PILs given wonderful results and wonderful judgments which have been considered. However, there are also cases wherein a PIL has been filed on frivolous grounds or for personal benefits, and those petitions have been dismissed by the Supreme Court with heavy petitions. I recently read in the newspaper that during the lockdown period, when all the state alcohol vendings were closed, There was a petition before the Kerala High Court that in the matters of lockdown, it is very essential for some individuals to have the liquor, and therefore the liquor suspension should not be there and the liquor shop should be opened. And in such case, the PIL was dismissed with the cost of rupees 1 lakh, I believe, which was wonderful because since if we have that right under the Article 32 by virtue of public interest litigation to enforce our rights and to make petitions before the Honorable Supreme Court for protection of the rights, there are also limitations and guidelines which needs to be followed, and therefore false public interest litigations, I believe, should not be filed. So public interest litigation was basically firstly used by Justice Krishna Iyer and Justice P.N. Bhagwati in the case of fertilizer crop versus Union of India. We all know Justice P.N. Bhagwati has delivered wonderful judgments in the scope of public interest litigation, and his judgments are worth reading. Every time you read it, it inspires you a lot. So basically, a public interest litigation is basically entertained uh, by the Supreme Court by way of even a complaints, which are letters addressed to the public spirited citizens of violation of the rights of disadvantages, dispossessed and deprived persons. So a public interest litigation, it is basically a term which was incorporated. However, a public interest litigation can only be filed under the preview of Article 32. And by virtue of public interest litigation, what has happened is that the scope of Article 32 has been widened because the locus, which is the main important issue under any writ, has been widened under the scope of public interest litigation, because if there is any person whose rights have been violated, or the society in general is affected by any acts of such persons by virtue of the fundamental rights of the society are violated, then any person or any public spirited person or an organization, a lot of NGOs for that matter also, can file a public interest litigation challenging under the Article 32 the violation of the fundamental rights. There are landmark cases by the Supreme Court, and continuously they've been repeatedly being filed, and judgment has been delivered. So a landmark one being the Article 377. So basically the petition under Article 377, wherein the 377 article was closed upon, was basically a judgment, a public interest litigation, wherein the rights of the persons who have the interests were being considered, and Article 377 ultimately was struck down. So what is basically a PIL, public interest litigation? Public interest litigation is a jurisdiction formed by the Supreme Court in the extension of the Article 32 of the Constitution. And it is not in the nature of an adversary litigation, but it is a challenge and an opportunity to the government and its officers to take basic human rights meaningful, and to enforce the deprived and vulnerable sections of the opportunity, and to assure them the social and economic justice, which is the signature tune of our Constitution. The public interest litigations was of SCB Gupta and others, which is basically known as the judges transfer case, in which the Honorable Supreme Court elaborately discussed the public interest litigations. So there are a lot of landmark cases. I have only jotted down few of them. The major one being Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan. This was a case wherein the Supreme Court, by virtue of a public interest litigation, has taken into consideration the offenses relating to women, sexual harassment of women at workplace. And accordingly, there was also recently an act which was formed, and it had been enforced by virtue of this PIL, wherein the Supreme Court held that any organization which has an employee strength of more than 12 employees, it is important that such organization has a committee to take redressal of the complaints of women who are sexually harassed at the workplace, and to redress such complaints and to take actions upon such. And there was also a penalty if such organizations who have an employee strength, if they refuse to form such committee, wherein they can be restrained and they can be penalized for not constituting a committee and for not taking the redressal of such complaints. The other landmark public interest litigation is the case of Sunil Batra versus Delhi administration. So in this case, there was one prisoner who had challenged the barbarous and the treatment of the prisoners not properly in the jail authorities, and this petition was filed by him challenging that the public police officials under the jail officials basically were not treating the prisoners properly and they were being inhumanly treated. And the Supreme Court had taken suo motu consideration of this public interest litigation, and letters were also circulated. And now the condition of the prisoners at the jail authorities have taken into consideration, and there is a lot of improvements in the jails for the prisoners, and they have a lot of facilities which are provided to them. Another landmark case is that of Murli S. Deora versus Union of India. So this is basically the public interest litigation wherein the smoking in public places was observed by the Supreme Court, and it was in this case that it was in this public interest litigation that the circular or the notification that if any person who's found smoking in public places is liable to be fined, and therefore the smoking in public places was banned by virtue of this public interest litigation. Another landmark PIL or a series of PIL were filed by Mr. MC Mehta, who is considered as the public interest litigator, because he is the one who has filed several or thousands of petitions under the public interest litigation, taking into consideration the ecology, the environment, and a lot of social economic offenses which were happening. So MC Mehta is one such case wherein the environment was protected, because if you all know that Agra Distillery river, which was there behind the Taj Mahal, it was polluted by a lot of industries, and it was only under this petition by Mr. MC Mehta versus Union of India, wherein the Supreme Court had taken the cognizance and the Agra river, which is behind the Taj Mahal, was clean, and industries were directed to not pollute such rivers. So I believe public interest litigation is a very essential part of such democratic country in which we live in, because any person who finds that, if a person is being violating, if any organization or any public authority is violating the fundamental rights of an individual or the community at large, any person has the locus to file such public interest litigations. So it is also important, if we understand the writs, to understand the difference between Article 32 and Article 226. So the basic major difference between Article 32 and Article 226 is that Article 32 has a very limited scope. However, Article 226 has a very widened scope, because under Article 32, a petition or a writ can only be filed when there is a violation of a fundamental right. However, in Article 226, it can be also for any other purpose. For any other purpose, meaning thereby that if there is any order by any lower court or any interim order wherein the court has exercised its jurisdiction or refused to exercise its jurisdiction, in such matters, under Article 226, a writ can be filed. Being lawyers, we all a lot of times file writ petitions when we find that the High Court cannot be approached in a petition while the matter is being pended. Because if there is no scope of appeal, by virtue of a writ under Article 226, you can challenge the said order before the Honorable High Court, and the High Court, lot of matters, they exercise their jurisdiction and they take suo motu cognizance upon such orders. So basically, the power under Article 226 is much wider than under the Article 32, because under Article 32, only when there is a violation of a fundamental right, a petition can be filed, wherein under Article 226, if there is any other purpose also, including the violation of the fundamental rights, if there is any other purpose also, wherein it has been found that the public authority is not exercising its jurisdiction, a writ can be filed before the High Court. So in that scenario, High Court has a much wider jurisdiction under Article 226. So the order under Article 32 will be superseding the order passed by the High Court under Article 226 of the Constitution previously. But an application under Article 226 may always be made first to the Supreme Court, since Article 32 is itself a fundamental right. It is a substantive right and not a procedural right. So it is not a compulsion that if you want to exercise your fundamental rights and if there's a violation of your fundamental right, it is not necessary that you have to first approach the High Court. You can as well, under Article 32, directly approach the Honorable Supreme Court of India. So in that scenario, Article 32 can be enforced directly, but our Article 226 can be only enforced when Article 32 has not been enforced. So 226 has to be enforced before Article 32 is enforced. However, in under Article 32, it is not necessary that the exercise of power under 226 has been enforced. And directly under Article 32, any person can directly move to the Supreme Court. So when we discuss about writs and fundamental rights and fundamental duties and the Article 32 and public interest litigation, another very important aspect which needs to be studied and discussed is the scope of judicial review. So judicial review, what is basically a judicial review? A judicial review is a type of a court proceeding in which a judge reviews the lawfulness of a decision made by a public body. We recently, right now, only discussed the power under mandamus and the power under prohibition and the certiorari. So, judicial review is such a term or the procedure under when the writs under mandamus, certiorari, and prohibition can be exercised. So, basically, judicial review is a challenge to the way in a decision has been made. Under the judicial review, any order which is being passed can be challenged by virtue of a judicial review. It is not really concerned with the conclusion of that process or whether they were a right, as long as the right procedure has been followed. So if any case wherein the procedure has not been followed properly or wherein the jurisdiction has been exercised in exceeding, so therefore a judicial review is exercised in that scenario. So coming to the conclusion, I would end my submission today with a very learned words given by the Audrey Roosevelt, which says that justice consists not being in neutral between right and wrong, but in finding out the right and upholding it whenever found against the wrong. Thank you everyone for patiently hearing to me. And if there are any questions, I'm willing to answer the same.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Okay, tell me.
Ma'am, if a person wants to file a public interest litigation, can he go for it without appointing an advocate?
Yes, certainly. Uh, every person has the right to approach the Supreme Court by way of being a petitioner in person. And there are a lot of examples wherein letters have been given to the Chief Justice or letters have been sent to the Chief Justice. And upon those letters, the Chief Justice suo motu has taken cognizance of such offences and the person in person has been assigned to give his contentions. Although under Supreme Court also there is a Supreme Court Legal Services Committee. So in case a person wants to take assistance of a legal aid lawyer, it can be provided to him. However, certainly he has the right to directly give his contention and give his pleadings being a petitioner in person. So there is no bar in that scenario that an advocate requirement is a must. It is there in every court from the lower court until the high apex court, that any person who contends, who wants to contend himself, he can appear as a petitioner in person and there is no objection to that effect.
Okay, ma'am. There is one more question from Rishabh Prasad. The question is, was the judgment of SP Gupta case was overruled by AOR versus state of...
Gujarat. Yes,
It
yes.
was overruled, ma'am?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Ma'am, there's no more further questions. So,
Let me ask one question from Meenakshi.
Yeah, certainly.
So Meenakshi, yes, how and in what way we shall differentiate between a writ filed in the Supreme Court and that to a High Court is on the basis of the importance of the matter or involvement of the Constitution? Because what we see that in both the writs, when we file, the matter of Constitution is definitely involved. But what is the locus, or what I say, that what should be kept in mind while filing a writ directly in the Supreme Court or directly into the High Court? What shall be the factors we should keep in mind?
See, I agree to your situation. I agree to your contention that, there are a lot of times we have the confusion whether to approach the Supreme Court directly or the High Court directly. So I believe in that scenario, if there is a confusion to that effect, it's better to always approach the High Court first under Article 226, since the procedure and the jurisdiction is wider. However, once we exercise our jurisdiction under Article 32 for the Supreme Court, we cannot thereafter come back to under Article 226 before the High Court, because the bar under res judicata will apply. And therefore, it is advisable that first we approach the High Court under Article 226 and thereafter approach the Supreme Court under Article 32.
I think that's a very, very smart and wise answer by Meenakshi. Has stated that always use the lower step so that you can have a higher step to challenge that order.
Wonderful.
Not go to the higher directly, so that you will not leave any room to challenge it. So
Certainly.
thank you, Meenakshi. With that, I think we shall conclude the today's session. Aishwarya, can you please go ahead with the thank you note of today's session for Meenakshi ma'am?
yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Meenakshi ma'am, for being here today. And thank you for such a informative and enlightening topic and the webinar. The webinar was really very informative and enlightening, and I'm sure for everyone. Not only this, ma'am, by providing such output and law about the topic was of immense knowledge. The eyes of many would get open on the subject. Last but not the least, we want to thank the viewer who were with us in today's webinar. Thank you so much. And lastly, I would like to thank Mr. Nitesh Mehra sir for giving me such an opportunity to moderate today's webinar. Thank you so much, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I also want to give credits to my two interns who helped me in such preparation of today's PPT, who are Ashwin Jha and Kunal Kumar. They really helped me today, and I really thank them for this.
Definitely, we shall always be thankful to these
Yes,
guys,
they
even our
receive,
interns,
they
even
need
Aishwarya
the due
also,
credit.
Riya also, who are always standing forward for assisting us in the moderating the webinars or providing the research material. I'm so much thankful to you, and it's great words by Meenakshi also to appreciate them at the end of the session. Thank you, all of you. We look for more such informative sessions from you, Meenakshi, in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.